Good morning, good afternoon, and evening, baseball fans. Welcome back to the Barstool Baseball Show. It is Wednesday, and today I am joined by Chris Castellani. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Should be a good one.
Now, normally you and I do Friday shows for American League, as we did throughout the first half, and kind of as the season gets in the second half. I think we might be a little bit more topical with the Wednesday, Friday shows. I know we want to be like tighter, quicker. If you haven't followed our Monday Power Ranking panel shows, go check that out. That's me, Castellani, Clemmer, and Hubs chopping up the top 9. But as we kind of get into the rest of the week programming, obviously the big story is a trade deadline.
For sure. Yeah, and I mean, I think that this trade deadline especially, I would say, and we've alluded to it in the past, is going to be one of the more intriguing ones of recent memory because I think we're going to have more buyers than we've had in the past. I think the expanded postseason has really helped with that. And I think outside of maybe the Atlanta Braves, who kind of exist on their own separate bubble, you know, when we do these power rankings, I think there's the amount of parity that we've had week to week just goes to show that I think there's a lot of teams right now that believe that this could be a special year, especially with, or if they make the right move. So I think there's going to be a lot of turnover, a lot of changes, and a lot of trades, which is going to make things, you know, pretty helter-skelter, which is fun.
So let's be specific for the audience. The trade deadline is next week, I believe Tuesday, 6 p.m.
What's interesting, and I think that we're doing this at the right time, because I have a feeling by the time this uploads, it will almost kick off the deadline. Because I feel like at some point here in the next few days, maybe even hours, someone's going to make a push, someone's going to make a move. Because there are some teams, like the Arizona Diamondbacks, who, while the expectation is they're going to be buyers, they're starting to fall a little bit further back in the standings. I think you might see some teams start to try to accelerate that process and make some moves maybe a week before some other teams do.
A lot of great points to start the show from you. This is also, if you look at Google and trends, this is by far the most active part in the MLB season for internet searching and people like going out and trying to acquire information about Major League Baseball. It's the hottest MLB is all year.
It's a neat thing for baseball because I think it allows for fans to kind of broaden their horizons a little bit and get more interested in other teams, other players, other prospects, and it helps grow the game.
So I want to set the stage for what we're walking into a week from now. It's a great point. We could see some stuff this week. There's a lot of pressure and urgency. There's more buyers than there are sellers. So we are officially 1 week out from the trade deadline. It's something that's been talked about for over a month and a half now, which teams are buying, which teams are selling. For purposes of today, I want to talk about the teams and categorize them into groups. Teams that are going to sell, teams that shouldn't sell, teams that might buy, and talk about this from a team level. Certainly players' names are going to come up along the way. And then we can spend more time later in the week about what type of players. The problem with players is you can get really sucked into a skill set. I don't want to spend 15 minutes talking about a player who matches up well with the Reds that isn't even traded because there's so much background conversations that go on behind these deals. So with that in mind, and in the spirit of the trade deadline, I would like to warm us up and get us kicked off with your favorite trade deadline of all time. I'm going to tell you mine. And it was in 2004, and it was when the Cubs went out and got Nomar Garciaparra and like a 16 deal. Brendan Harris got moved from the Cubs and then had a nice career from the Twins. I think the Cubs gave up like only another player or two. Garciaparra did not have a good tenure with the Cubs at all.
No.
And the 04 Cubs is all-time disappointing team in our franchise's history. Yeah. But it was still fucking awesome being in high school. We got Nomar. So, like, there's these moments coming in the trade deadline for baseball fans. And that was my favorite. And I fucking love the deadline for giving people that love. But in the same vein, I also have that pain of being at the Field of Dreams game. And White Sox Day was like, did you hear Anthony Rizzo just got traded? So, like, the spectrum of emotions we're walking into. But Nomar for sure was my number one.
My favorite, there's actually a lot of parallels between ours because both of ours actually ended poorly. The 2004 Cubs did not make the playoffs. And ours, the one I'm referring to, did not result even in a playoff win. But a little story, it was 10 years after 04. It was summer 2014. I just wrapped up high school. I was in Traverse City, Michigan. There's a Traverse City Film Festival there that Michael Moore funds. And I was it's true. I was in a Q&A session with, I believe his name is Larry Charles, who's the man who's responsible for helping direct and co-create Borat. And he was there answering questions. I checked my phone. And the deadline was just about to happen, and I got the notification that the Tigers had acquired David Price. And I remember throughout that day, the popular theory was that Oakland was going to go all out for David Price. They had a really good year that year. They had a great team. They had just traded Yoenis Cespedes for John Lester, and there were rumors that maybe they weren't done, and you knew Price was going to be on the move, and it was just the ultimate, like, as much as it ended poorly, they got swept by the Orioles, though that wasn't David Price's fault. He pitched very well in the postseason in his one start. But there is just something so much fucking fun about that kill shot of like, oh, not only are we going to get our guy, we're going to make sure another team doesn't get their guy. And we'll unload, we'll empty the clip, we'll sell out our farm system. I think we ended up trading, I think it was Willie Adames and Ezekiel Carrera. Adames has gone on to have a fine major league career. Ezekiel Carrera was a serviceable platoon guy for the Blue Jays for a bit. But that was so much fun to me. And Dombrowski had some great trade deadline moves, Doug Fister in 2011. But when you look at your phone and you're like, holy shit, there's 4 Cy Young winners on this team. That is such a fun feeling to have, of knowing your team's going for it. Your team doesn't give a rat's ass about their farm system. What matters is going out and winning the World Series. And while it didn't yield any positive results in the playoffs, we won that division by 1 game, and it's because David Price started game 162 and pitched 7 1/3 scoreless, or 7 2/3 scoreless, I think. So like that, just that feeling, that comfort, that knows with that, like you're gonna have the rest of your summer to be like, let's fucking do it, let's go for it, let's go for the kill shot. That's always fun.
Yeah, and in the history of trade deadlines in my lifetime, I would say there probably isn't a better one than CC Sabathia going to the Milwaukee Brewers from Cleveland. And then he made 17 starts for Milwaukee in 2008, went 11-2 with a 1.65 ERA. He threw 6 complete games.
He finished 5th in Cy Young voting in 17 starts and 6th in MVP voting. That's how dominant he was, that he played less than half a season in one league. And they were like, dude, is this guy the best pitcher in baseball? Like, we might have to give him the fucking Cy Young. Wild seed, I would say. And CC had a great year, or a great career, like, obviously. That, he's a guaranteed Hall of Famer because of that stretch. He'd be closer to fringe, I feel like, if not for that little run where he was far and away the best pitcher in the world.
Yeah, great runs in baseball hit different. When you remember that moment in the season, obviously Arrieta in 2015, like, that's just, people would come up to Jake last year and just be like, I was at, you wouldn't believe this and that, where I was for the no-hitter. People just bond themselves to these runs. The CC Sabathia one. Now, again, that trade could have gone way south. I remember Matt Laporta was involved in that. That was a name he's never going to get moved. Now, reflecting back 15, 16 years later, teams are significantly less willing to move that Matt Laporta. Like, would they do that trade this year? Probably not. With the amount of prospect capital that was going into it, probably not. I would guess.
Yeah.
Well,
no, I
look back now and it's like, who are the CC Sabathias on the move this year? Probably none at the top of my head. I don't see any pitchers that are, unless the Mets decide to open up. So let's talk about team level. And I want to start off with the teams that absolutely are going to trade. These are teams that are 100% going to sell, and this is the bottom of the league. Yeah. And this is a great point to what you were saying about more buyers because there's more playoff spots. Traditionally, you could throw 12 teams on this list. I only have 7. Between the Rockies, Pirates, Nationals, White Sox, Royals, Tigers, A's. This is a clear bottom of the league. Yeah. And I hate to include the Tigers in that because they have played well, but like
I'm fine with it. I've made peace with that. And I'm people might roll their eyes at this, especially Tiger fans. It's better that they make the decision to trade assets than to come up with some delusional Pittsburgh Pirates circa 2018 vibe where it's like, oh shit, we're in the race. Let's trade Austin Meadows and Tyler Glass now for Chris Archer. Like, I think that we would potentially be setting ourselves back if we looked at this and we were 3 games back in the Central and went, fuck it, let's hold on to everybody. Like, I've watched this team enough. They're not in position to make a run for the playoffs. I don't think they're that far away from being competitive, but they need to have a good deadline, and I think that will require the shipping of assets. I guess the question I want to open up to you here, looking at this part of the list, is which one of these 7 teams that will definitely sell do you think can benefit the most from a good deadline?
Well, the White Sox have so much good major league ready pitching that can get moved right now. Like, I'm already seeing Kopech's name in like loose talks for Jonathan India.
I think so too, but I think they should go full fire sale and they won't. Like, I think they're going to hold on to Dylan Cease, and I don't think they should. Like, I think that Giolito will be gone. I understand the hesitation with Robert because I think Robert hasn't quite even reached his ceiling, and his ceiling is, but like, I think his value a year from now could be even greater. But I think that they're at a point where this empire they were trying to build has crumbled around them. They are not even, many of their players have underachieved, many of the prospects have underperformed, and even the guys that have extreme talent seems like they kind of get in their own way sometimes. I think they would benefit the most and could potentially have the quickest turnaround with the right moves, but I feel like they might cop out a little. But the other teams on this list, it's sad to say, but I don't think teams like the Rockies or Nationals or A's have enough to offer where they can have a earth-shattering deadline that you look back on and go, hey, that's where they built their core. I think the Tigers probably of those teams with their pitching probably has the most to offer there, with Erod and Lorenzen being, a potential rental pieces. Erod has a contract opt-out, so it might not be a rental. But beyond that, I think the White Sox stand out as the team that can potentially benefit the most from a good deadline. I just don't know how willing they'll be to pull the trigger.
Yeah, and from the group of teams that absolutely should sell, we've talked about these 7 teams. The White Sox and the Tigers are kind of different than the rest of these 5 teams. Like the Rockies, Pirates, Nationals, they're so far, like the Athletics. Right. And maybe the Nationals aren't so far away because they have so many young players playing at the same time. But the sentiment when you look at the Nationals versus the rest of the NL East is, holy fuck, are these guys far away? The other question I have is, what do you think it's more important or more valuable for a solid number 2? Would you think David Bednar, closer, a dominant closer, would you rather have a dominant closer, or would you rather have a number 2, number 3 starting pitcher?
Well, it's very dependent on your team's needs, but I would say in the modern age, dominant closer. Because I think that when you look at recent teams that have won the World Series, last year's Astros were a prime example of it. Now, of course, you have Verlander and Frommer and Christian Javier, but the truth is, those games were over after 6 innings because you could go Abreu, Montero, Neris, Presley, or whatever order you wanted to go in. I think that we've seen, when you look at teams that have made deep runs through October over the last decade or so, almost all of them had closers that were nails, that would go 7 for 7 and save opportunities in the postseason. And I think teams that often end up coming undone in October, it often goes back to one thing, which is they have good starting pitching. They might have a good lineup. Bullpen has a tendency to fall apart. I think a guy in this age, and so much of it is dependent on what your team needs. I don't think the Orioles would benefit from getting David Bednar. Well, what's the point? You have Cano and you have Batista at the back end of your pen. But I think with some other teams that might, like the Rangers, I'd say, you know what, fuck a number 2 starting pitcher, go out and get your dominant closer because, as we saw last night, even Aroldis Chapman got popped. So it's anything you can do to add bullpen depth, especially when you have a lineup that's good and starting pitching that's usually pretty solid, is almost the top necessity. I also think bullpen depth is the easiest to add at the deadline because you probably don't have to give up the most compared to what you might have to give up for a premium starting pitcher or a premium power bat.
These are all great points.
Thank you.
Let's get teams. Okay, so teams that absolutely will sell. We said those were 7 of 30 teams. I have 6 teams in the next group. These are teams that should consider selling. So these are 6 teams. So I've got Cubs, I've got Mets, I've got Cardinals, Padres, and then Angels, Mariners from the American League. So I've got 4 National League teams: Cubs, Mets, Cardinals, Padres. And then on the American League side, I've got Angels and Mariners. Let's just start on the American League side. Do you agree Angels and Mariners should sell?
Yes, I think this section is the toughest one to gauge because I think these 6 teams have the toughest decisions because they're the teams that I would qualify as kind of being in limbo, where I think I keep waiting for a team like the Mariners to get hot, and I just feel like they never will. Now, I don't think they're that far away, so I don't know what the purpose would be of a true, unloading of assets. But maybe, I think that you look at a team like the Mets, the Cardinals, the Padres, there's top tier talent there, but how much would they be willing to unload? How far away do they think they are? The Angels intrigue me because they are the one team of all 30 teams that I think as of this moment, it's July 25th, doesn't know what they're going to do. I think they should sell. You agree, I would say that they should sell. I think it'd be better for the league if Ohtani was gone. But even if it's not Ohtani, I think that listening to some of the quotes by some of the players and even some of their front office, if there's one team that I think might surprise everybody and be dumb enough to buy, I think it could be them.
That's crazy. If they buy, that's the general manager purely making pride moves. That's the front office and the decision-making nucleus of the Angels purely operating off of pride and ego because it would make so much sense to take Shohei Ohtani to the trade market. I mean, you basically have the two of the best rentals of all time in Shohei as a pitcher and Shohei as a hitter. The Cubs one's interesting right now because a lot of people are saying they've got 6 games before they play the Reds before the trade deadline. And if they go 6-0 over that time period, I think they're like 53-50, and then you can start working backwards. If they're 5-1, they're 52-51 or something to that extent. And so a lot of Cubs fans are saying, hey, if we're hot over this next week, maybe we should be buyers. And I can't get off of my high horse of World Series aspirations. I feel like a crazy person, but it's like, what would be the point of going to the wild card round and getting fucking slaughtered?
Right. And doing so while potentially sacrificing your future.
This is the group where we're not talking about guys selling off like a reliever that can give you a couple good innings. I mean, we're talking about, Marcus Stroman, Cody Bellinger. When you go to the Mets, you bring up Max Scherzer. We talk about the Angels, Shohei Ohtani. Go to the Mariners. They've got a ton of good young pitching, and they've got some questions in the infield. And then obviously with the Cardinals, like you see Goldschmidt and Arenado's name get thrown around, and Padres. Trading Juan Soto would be.
They're not
like it would be an insane thing.
I would say their move, and the guys on Pick Central talked about this. Their move should be trading Blake Snell. Because Blake Snell is a bizarre pitcher where when he's locked in, I think he's one of the 5 to 10 best pitchers in baseball. The problem is he's locked in for a 2-month stretch every 4 years. Like when he was in 2018, when he won the Cy Young, he went that entire summer where he just didn't give up runs. And then he'll have command issues, and then he'll have durability issues, and he'll only go 5 innings at a time, and he'll have walk issues. But the way he's pitched the last 2 months, Clemmer brought this up, I think on Pick Central, he's right. The Orioles make so much sense for him because he immediately becomes their one. He's a veteran pitcher. He's been through the postseason before. He's pitching the World Series before. And I think talk about a guy whose value has totally peaked in a contract year, only a rental. That's a piece that you unload. I don't think he's part of the long-term plan in San Diego. I mean, they've spent their money. I mean, they've all but admitted, like, we ain't going to re-sign Juan Soto when he hits the free agent market. You're not going to do the same with Blake Snell. I think if they unload Snell and keep everybody else, I think that would be fair game at this point, considering the way they've gone this year. I mean, they got their shit pumped by the Pirates last night. They're not going anywhere.
No, they're not. They've been a bad team all year.
Yeah.
They have a crazy positive run differential, by the way. I think it's almost 50 runs now.
They suck in close games. They suck in one-run games.
They suck.
In extra inning games and one-run games. They're awful. Yeah.
Just going back quickly to this list again, I want to recap. We've got Cubs, Mets, Angels, Mariners, Cardinals, and Padres. So there's 13 teams here that we're saying could be sellers. That's my seller's market.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Of the 30 teams.
That's the one issue you run into is that 500 baseball is the worst place to be because you're not quite good enough to buy and become a World Series contender, and you're not quite bad enough to sell and rebuild. I think one team that is in, and I might be jumping the gun here a little bit, but one team that is in a very vulnerable position, in my opinion, is the Cleveland Guardians, because I think that Cleveland last year really fell in love with this scrappy team that they had that put the ball in play. They had their system. They ran the bases well, but they've had so much regression. And the one thing we've said about Cleveland forever, really for the last decade, is there is not an organization in baseball that develops starting pitching the way these guys do, but their starting pitching, Bieber and McKenzie, I think, are seriously injured. And that not only impacts the way that they go forward for the rest of this season, I think it should impact the way they go forward into next season. They're not a team that's known for spending a ton of money. I think they would benefit from selling. The problem is your biggest trade chip is on the 60-day IL, and that's Shane Bieber. They have done a remarkable job in the past of selling high with a lot of assets. You can't do that right now because your best assets are on the IL. So I think that they're in a very vulnerable spot right now.
I think they were clenching their butt cheeks waiting to get to the trade deadline, hoping they could move Shane Bieber because he's right in that 12, 18-month window when they love to move guys.
Yep. I think it was going to happen.
Terrible situation, but I think what the Guardians have done is like they're becoming like these soft sellers, like play with house money, see what you have. Like you don't have to move guys off. If you can't move Bieber now, you can move him in the offseason if he comes in and has a couple good starts at the end of September, or maybe you can get to the playoffs. He's officially out until September 10th, and there's no minor leagues to rehab him in. So he's just going to come back and do simulated games. So if the Guardians can get hot and compete with the Twins in the Central down the stretch, that's an interesting storyline. But if from the Guardians' perspective, that's not an ideal storyline at all. Let's go to teams that absolutely, where we think absolutely should make a move. Like Absolutely. If these teams aren't trading at the deadline and you're a fan of them, fucking grab the pitchforks and go start riding. And I'm going to start off Orioles. If the Orioles don't make a move, fucking burn that city to the ground.
Yeah. I wrote a whole blog about that yesterday. I mean, they just keep fucking winning. Last night, they won a game in Philadelphia where Yainer Cano and Felix Bautista weren't available, and they somehow pulled it out. It's like they are, and this is the blog I wrote.
I'm sorry. And the game-winning hit was an opposite field double from the rookie backup center fielder that came in because Cedric Mullins made a diving catch and like rolled his wrist, or Aaron Hicks rolled his wrist.
Rolled his wrist, yeah.
Rolled his wrist. And Cedric Mullins is down, and Aaron Hicks was subbing in. So this is like your third string center fielder with an opposite field double in the ninth inning after throwing Bryce Harper out in the bottom of the eighth at the plate. Like, if you didn't see that game, the reason I'm calling it out is because we talk about the Orioles all the time as this team that just simply doesn't lose. And you bringing up no Bautista, no Cano into that ridiculous late inning sequence of events is a perfect example of why the Orioles need to go by, because you don't have this fucking magic forever.
Boom, exactly. And that's the point. I think that there's this perception. I was on a live stream talking about this, and people said, well, the Orioles are very young. That core is going to be here for a long time. And that may be true. In fact, I bet it is true. But I'm telling you, man, you cannot guarantee next year that every one of these guys is going to be healthy the way they are right now. You cannot guarantee that you're going to get the magic that you're getting out of the back end of your pen. You can't guarantee that you're going to have the team chemistry, the camaraderie that this team has, the energy that they have, being this first great Orioles team really since they made it to the ALCS in 2014. These opportunities, these magical seasons don't arise every single season. Don't take pitches at the deadline here and be like, oh, well, there's always next year. We're going to stick with the plan, stick with the process. You have no guarantee that things are going to fall into place the way that they have for you this season. They have to go for it right now. And that may mean unloading some very popular pieces in what is admittedly a loaded farm system. I'm not saying you got to dump Jackson Holiday, right, and sacrifice every little piece of your future, but you have a deep enough system right now where you can add enough pieces and immediately make yourselves the favorite to at least win the American League. Don't let that opportunity slip away because, next year might be just as good. You cannot guarantee that, man.
The other team I'm throwing into this mix with the Orioles where you have that sense of like, go burn the city down if they don't do it, is Cincinnati. Because what the Reds players have done to put themselves in this position and compete with the Brewers so quickly, and they've won the fan base back. Yeah. That Cincinnati fan base can be super rabid. They've been dormant for years. And so now that you're filling Great American Ballpark up, like ownership, front office, everybody's got to buy in, put their fucking dicks on the table, or their clits, and just go get the absolute best players you can.
No, I'm with you. And I think with a team like Cincinnati, there's two things that make them very enticing here. One is they don't play in a great division. They're chasing Milwaukee. That's all they got to chase. St. Louis stinks. Cubs aren't going anywhere this year. The Pirates are awful. And also, they have one issue. I think that when you have a team that has multiple flaws, it's harder to kind of duct tape and piece all those pieces together at the deadline. There's one issue. They need more starting pitching. Starting pitching is always available at the deadline. They have a good closer, solid back end of the pen. They have an offense that's electric, some good young players. They can win that division this year. They're a team that I feel like may, in many ways, in terms of World Series contention, be 1 year away. But right now, they can put themselves in position to win the division this year while also assembling a roster for next season that you look at and go, God damn, the Reds are going to be dangerous here for a minute. I think they have nowhere to go but up with a good deadline. They have enough solid pieces in the system that they could potentially unload a few of them, get some solid starting pitching back, and, who knows what he'll end up being, but you're going to get Hunter Green back soon. So let's say you add one starting pitcher, this rotation that everyone talks about being so awful. Well, let's say you add I'll use Erod as an example. Let's say you add an Erod. All of a sudden, you're looking at that 1, 2, 3 of Andrew Abbott, Eduardo Rodriguez, and Hunter Green. I'm okay going into a playoff series with those three guys, leading the charge with the way that they've gone this season. They're another team that I feel like can be closer than people think. Close to the World Series, I just don't know if there's enough depth there. But a team that can make it deep run to the NLCS, win the Central, sure, why the hell not?
Yeah, so the Reds and the Orioles are very similar to me because of the payroll and the young talent and the momentum and all these great narratives. Those are the pitchfork teams to me. There's other teams on this list. Like if the Yankees don't make a move, fuck it, you're the fucking Yankees. Like if they're gonna make a move, they should make a move. But I'm talking purely from a fan perspective where you're just irate, you're ready to just turn it in. What more do we have to do to turn it around and put us in a position at a trade deadline and still we can't go make some big moves? That's the Orioles and the Reds. I want to draw a quick distinction here, Chris. Because Phillies fans are saying we need to get shit. Diamondbacks fans are saying we need to go get stuff. It's just a little bit different to me with the Reds and the Orioles. It's just there is nuance. For the Phillies, it's because they already spent a fuck ton of money. Keep be gutting farm systems when you got Castellanos and Schwarber on the books, and you just gave Trey Turner, $500 million, whatever. Yeah, there's no room for. You got to let those guys play through their careers, and you got to redevelop your farm system. I wouldn't be too aggressive if I was the Phillies. Bunch of other names. I want to get back to teams that absolutely will buy, and let's chunk in some of the top of the league that we talk about in the power rankings. I'm just going to throw all these teams at you right now. The Rangers, the Dodgers, the Rays, and the Braves. Teams that have been very good, that have World Series aspirations, that do need some patchwork. I'd say the Braves the least. Their lineup is so fucking good, but they still need help with starting pitching. But going back, it's Rangers. Hey, you guys are very good, could win the division, World Series roster. Obviously, same thing with the Dodgers. The Rays have been
struggling
bad. Yeah, but you can't wait. They're still good. They're still a good club. And then the Braves. That would be like the four really, really good teams that, if you're serious, this is a year you can win the World Series. You already have a great roster. You probably have enough to get to a World Series and win it right now. But maybe not the Rays. What do you think about that grouping?
I think a lot of them have similar issues, which is starting pitching. I mean, the Dodgers have this explosive offense, but assuming Kershaw comes back healthy, I don't know if there's enough depth to that rotation. They can definitely add. The one thing that pretty much all those teams you just mentioned, especially the Dodgers and Rays, do have and have always had are good deep farm systems. They are always capable of making moves at the deadline because they do such a great job with their development.
So between the Rays, Dodgers, and obviously Rangers, and where do you see the team that needs kind of the most help, or what's something you would immediately come in and fix? General manager Castellani.
Well, I think between those three teams, the one that is closest and the one I feel best about right now is the Texas Rangers, because I think that the Dodgers will add a starting pitcher at the deadline. I worry that they need more than just one, unless Urias goes back to pitching like the Cy Young caliber pitcher that he was a year ago, which is a tall tough ask at this point. Gonsolin's been okay, and who knows what you're going to get out of Kershaw when he comes back. I think there's multiple things that they need to do to put themselves in World Series contention, and I don't know if they can do that with one deadline. The Rays, I think, I've talked about it before. I feel like I've really bashed them, but I think there's some serious problems in terms of just the last few hitters in that lineup and the durability of their starting pitching. I think the Rangers have one flaw right now, and it's their pen. And they keep trying to add, and they got Aroldis Chapman, who had been good until last night when the Astros, got to him and hit a 3-run home run off of him in what was one of the wilder games of the season. I think that they're going to go all out for pitching. I think that, as I brought up earlier, bullpen pieces are probably the easiest to add at the deadline. But I also think that they probably need another starter. John Gray started to fall apart a little bit. Martin Perez hasn't been great. Eovaldi's their ace, and then after that, it's just kind of so. So I think that they're the closest of those three teams to putting themselves in World Series contention. In fact, I would argue they already are. I also think, and this is an idea I was kind of tossing around in my head earlier, I don't know if a team like the Rangers benefits or hurts themselves from the fact that they are in such a tight divisional race. I feel like last year you had the Mets and the Braves who were in win the division now playoff mode for months. Whereas some other teams like the Yankees last year had the division wrapped up in May. I think a team like the Rangers is going to be more inclined to go for a kill shot at the deadline because not only are they trying to win a World Series, but they have the Astros on their tail as well. They're only, I think, 2 games up at this point, where I think the Dodgers pretty comfortable with their divisional lead. The Rays are trying to chase the Orioles, but I think that the Rays' issues are not necessarily problems that can be solved with a few good moves at the deadline. The Rangers are definitely closest, but the bullpen will be their Achilles heel until proven otherwise.
Yeah, and I think we can look at least for the Rangers, the AL West winner is going to be probably the 2 seed in the American League playoff format.
Unless they just
host the ALDS.
Yes.
They're a wild card team. They could be on the road going to an East Coast. If they fall apart or I shouldn't say fall apart, but if they don't finish the season strong, the playoff format is so much harder as a wild card team than it is as a 1 or 2 seed. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, so much harder.
Well, I mean, I think we saw that happen last year in the NL East, where you had it was so important, and people that we work with have made this point as well, and they were right. It was so important to win that division, especially because the one thing, baseball is we talk about it all the time, the regular season is a marathon, not a sprint. I think regardless of how many games you win, the last thing you want is to put yourself in a position where you have a best of 3 game series, because that is a minute sample size where if one of your really good pitchers has a bad start, it could fuck your entire season. Now, the same thing can be said in a 5-game series as well, but you have a little bit more leeway. The idea of you grind your ass off for 162 only for it to come down to potentially 2 or 3 home games is not something you want to get into. You want to have that rest. You want to set up your rotation for a 5-game series. And that makes, that puts you in the best position possible. So I think that both the Rangers and Astros will be looking to put themselves in position to get those buys in the first round.
Now, the reason I include, and if we go through this list of teams that will buy, I just wanted to put the Yankees and the Blue Jays in here, and maybe the Blue Jays are a little soft just because there's so much the roster is so good, they're not nearly as good as they should be. Do they have the prospect capital to move? The Yankees have to. The Yankees are always active at the trade deadline. I just feel like if they're not serious buyers at the trade deadline, then it's not a real Major League Baseball season. It's the fucking New York Yankees. They're making moves. To me, they're absolutely at that trade deadline, making shit happen. And then, like I said, the Blue Jays, there's that sense of pressure. They need to go get some pitching. They need some help. That lineup's too good to sit on your hands at a trade deadline, right?
For sure. Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. And I think with the Blue Jays, what their issue is they are just baseball's biggest sleeping giant. It's like if their lineup comes together and those guys get hot at the same time, I could see them having a run like what the Phillies had last year, where you watch them the first few rounds of the playoffs and you're like, how did this team ever struggle? I mean, this lineup is just full of mashers. I think that even though they'll add at the deadlines, somewhat, I think that their biggest issue is getting out of their own way. A team like the Yankees are in a very interesting position because we've said, going back to doing the power rankings, in months ago, I need to see something from this Yankees team that makes me say, okay, this Yankees team is different than the Yankees teams that have come up short in the postseason in the past. Of course, the big kind of trump card here is what version of Aaron Judge do we get when he comes back? And if he is fully healthy, it does change the dynamic of the team. But I don't know what moves they could make that make me say, okay, the Yankees are immediately or could potentially be a favorite to win the American League. The hot pick right now is Bellinger. Let's say they get Bellinger, and let's say Bellinger hits the way that he's hit over the last month or so. I don't think that's enough. I think there's multiple pieces that needed to be added to that offense for me to consider them a World Series contender. And I don't think that those are moves that can be made in one deadline. I think that's something that's going to take more time and potentially a revamped offseason to really bolster that roster. So they could put themselves in position to make the playoffs. And I do think that, as we've seen over the last several years, Brian Cashman's philosophy is if you get in, we can make a push. But I don't know how much they can add here to really bolster their standing or improve their standing in this really difficult division.
Sure. And I think that's extremely well said. I have no disagreements with you at all.
Thank you.
How about that?
Yeah, that's rare. People don't disagree with me. I feel that makes me feel good. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I want to so we're kind of getting into the trade deadline and getting our minds wrapped around what teams could be buying, what teams should be selling. There's a group of teams that have playoff aspirations at the time of recording that are why are you not talking about us? Why are you not talking about the Red Sox, who 20-12 their last 32? I think they're 6 games above 500 in 5th place. They're nipping at the Yankees' heels as we talk about them as a team that absolutely will buy. Another team, the Brewers. Did they already make their trade deadline acquisition with Sal Frelick? And as we talked about in the Power Ranking show, Corbin Burns' resurgence. Do they need to be that active, or can they play with house money and be smart because they're as small market gets?
I think they should be active, the Brewers. I think that because I've joked about them and I've said I don't think they have any chance of winning the World Series, but I would say what they should do, because their strength for the last several years has been their pitching, whether it be starting pitching, relief pitching, what have you. I would say they're a team that would benefit so much from making a move for Blake Snell. And all of a sudden, that I I would argue their potential to actually make a push to and maybe win the World Series increases tenfold when you go into a playoff series being like, fuck, we got to face Snell and Corbin Burns back-to-back in a game 1 and 2 situation where you're going to have to face those guys 4 times in a 7-game series, maybe more if one of them comes out of the pen at some point. Like, that makes them extremely dangerous. As far as the Red Sox go, they are in a bizarre position because I think coming into the season, I think they wanted to sell. I think that they added the pieces they added, knowing, okay, this will be a 78-win ball club that'll be out of contention come July, and we can unload some assets, build the farm system, and we can be pretty darn good for the future here because we got Rafi Devers locked up long-term. We added Yoshida. He's a stud. We just need to add some pitching and we'll be good. They're too good to sell. Like, I don't see them unloading assets 6 games above 500, but I also think that when you assess where you're at the deadline, you have to pay attention to where you are in the standings. And I don't see how they could, and I don't think they have the farm system to do it either. I don't see how they could make enough moves to put themselves in contention to win the American League East either. So they are very much in limbo. I think their best course of action would be to stand pat because I don't think they're that far away from being competitive, but I don't think that there's any moves that they can make this year that would put them similar to the Yankees, that would put them in a position where I go, oh shit, Red Sox, AL East favorites, potential World Series favorites. It's a very bizarre stance that they find themselves in.
Yeah. Especially because they're just getting so much offensive production. Like they're second in the American League in batting average. I think they're second in on base, 4th in slugging. Their pitching staff's an absolute fucking disaster. But why would you try and solve the pitching and the run prevention woes at a trade deadline?
Right.
Where you're going to impact the future of the organization tremendously when you've identified young players between Verdugo, obviously Yoshida, they signed him for $90 million. That looks like such a bargain. Jarren Duran, like, correct me if I'm wrong. It's like Tristan Cassis is okay to fucking, like, people don't hate that guy in the least bit, right? Like, he's a part of their fucking plans. They don't have Trevor Story. Like,
that's
some good stuff there at the Red Sox where, again, this is like my house money category. It's like, you guys are already hot. Just stay hot. Like, roll with this offensive amalgamation. Whatever. It's a beast. That team is so weird looking to me because they're so bad. They're so bad at keeping runs off the board that they roll that lineup and it just fucking smashes people. And Fenway is so hard to play at. The later the season goes, the harder and the more challenging and the louder. They're on top of you there.
Yeah, and when you look at the Red Sox teams that have been successful in the past, I mean, we can talk about any of the 4 teams that won a championship, but their great equalizer was the top end of that rotation. I mean, whether it was Schilling and Pedro, Josh Beckett, Lester and Lackey, it's like I don't think there's anything they can do at this deadline to put together a rotation that could rival what those guys brought to Boston and the type of caliber of teams that they brought to Boston during that era. So I think that that's something that is more inclined to be fixed in free agency. I think that if you make moves at the deadline right now, you run the risk of potentially impacting the long-term outlook of your organization by getting greedy.
And keep in mind, that's our only AL East team here where we're like, it's okay if they don't make a move. Every other team, we're like, guaranteed, slam dunk, boom, take it to the bank. That's the AL East for you. I love that shit.
Yep.
Can we go to the Astros for a second? I don't think the Astros need to make a trade move because, like you've brought up 1,000 times on the shows this year, Yordan Alvarez is going to be the biggest trade deadline acquisition. They've got talent in the pitching staff. They're riding Framber so hard. Maybe it's even not a bad fucking thing if they get October off so they can rest some of these guys. It's like every other was just loading more and more appearances into these guys. And then the lineup too. The reason you would they don't need a trade to add pieces to a lineup where like any day the switch could flip. You're just like waiting for some of these guys to get going a little bit. And then you see Jeremy Pena is your World Series MVP, dominates in October. Had an 89 OPS plus in the regular season last year.
Yeah.
My point with Astros is saying they have experience winning at the highest level without having to go out to the trade deadline and add this and that. So even though they're underperforming relative to our expectations, it can be very quickly turned around. I feel like almost turned around so quickly and easily that negates their need to hit this trade deadline very hard and just fuck with what you already have. If the Astros are going to be very good, they're going to be very good.
They have a lot of belief in their team, and they have a lot of belief in their system. They're the masters of finding guys. I mean, in many ways, things should have gone sideways for them this season with the injuries and some of the underperformance by the pitching, and yet, or mainly by the offense, but even with some of the pitchers falling off a little bit. But you're finding in these summer months production from guys you probably didn't expect. Early on in the season, it was Mauricio Dubon was like a hitting fool. Now, out of nowhere, fucking Chas McCormick is tearing the cover off the ball. Like, he's like legitimately, Chas McCormick's got a 902 OPS right now. Like, he's kind of killing it. And you take into account the fact that you're getting some of your core pieces back. And we've gone back and forth about pedigree and whether postseason history matters. To me, it does. And I think that until proven otherwise, the Houston Astros are still the boogeyman here. Like, they are the last team that every team in the American League is going to want to face come October, because these guys are conditioned. They know the grind of a major league season. They know the grind of a postseason. They're going to be as scary as anybody come October, especially if they can find a way to get somewhat healthy, which it looks like they're going to, getting Altuve and Yordan back. I still think they'll make a move. I don't know exactly what it'll be. The one issue that you kind of run into, and I think the Braves have a similar problem, is that because they've been buyers at so many deadlines recently for good reason, you don't have a huge farm system and many pieces that you can offer that are like, hey, we're going to give you our best prospects and you get to give us Dylan Cease back. I don't think they're really in position to go for the kill like that, but they'll add a piece here or there, maybe a bullpen arm, maybe a starting pitcher, just to make sure that they can bolster their depth a little bit. But I think they're pretty content given the way that this season is shaped out, the fact that they're only 2 games back of a Rangers team that's had a phenomenal year. I think they feel like they're in position to win this division.
Yeah, no arguments here. Astros absolutely can win that division. And I think there's a huge portion of people that are expecting the Astros win. Not just that they can. People that are like betting on them heavily and think that the Astros are better than the Rangers in the long run. The NL West a little funky. I just want to package this up with Giants, Diamondbacks. Like, they're teams that could stand pat, could make moves, could do nothing. I have them equally plotted on our spectrum. There's a whole range of possibilities, which is why I just want to spend our last talking point going back to the Reds and the Orioles.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just want to agree the Giants and the Diamondbacks, because this would mean we've talked about every team. The Giants and the Diamondbacks can do fucking anything. I wouldn't be surprised.
I think there's a definite. I think those are 2 teams that are a little bit uncertain about where they stand. I think the if you would have asked me 2 weeks ago where the Diamondbacks were going to be at, I would have said full send, complete buyers. They're going to make a move. I think the way that they've fallen off, I think that it's a young team, it's an inexperienced team, and I think they've gotten punched in the gut a few times here. I don't think Corbin Carroll's completely healthy, but every time I feel like they're starting to trend downward, they'll win 2 out of 3 on the road against Atlanta or something like that. So they'll make a move or 2. I don't think that they're going to make the huge splash that a lot of people might have predicted them to make a month ago. The San Francisco Giants just exist in their own little bubble. Like, I don't think, even when they were really great and they were winning World Series, they made the Hunter Pence deal in 2012, I believe, but I don't recall a lot of like, oh shit, the Giants, that's a huge, like, they abide by their system. They have their platoon guys. Their offense is balanced across the board. Maybe, and I've heard this name thrown around, if they really want to go for it, because they do have a good team, I think Justin Verlander would thrive there with that fucking pitching lab that they have and that park being as big as it is. If they want to go for their kill shot, that would be the one. Beyond that, I think that they're kind of content with where they are. I think they feel like they're within striking distance. They are 8 games above 500, but I think the dynamic of the division has changed with the Dodgers getting hot. And you talk about the boogeyman in that division. I mean, until proven otherwise, it will be the Dodgers, division to win. With Arizona, I think that they've had a very successful year. I hope they make the playoffs. You have a star in Corbin Carroll. I think they're one of those teams, unlike the Orioles, that kind of needs to assess this and say, even if we made the right moves, we're probably one good free agent offseason away from really putting ourselves in World Series contention. Don't sacrifice the future for the present necessarily, though. I do think they'll add a piece or 2.
A piece or 2 to the bullpen is great. Going out and getting everyday help, a little bit different to me. And I like the Diamondbacks just playing out this season, winning or failing, succeeding or failing to get to the playoffs. And letting those players come back to spring training the next year, I think that allows the Diamondbacks to take a bunch of big steps forward. if you have that core and that crew, it's like, hey, remember in August? And you don't want to be giving these guys excuses. Be like, well, we went out, we traded, we got this, we shook the roster up. And I'm saying that specific to the Diamondbacks, to a young team that's captured our hearts. But then at the end of the day, if you're trading to get to the wild card, you should fire your general manager.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Now, especially if you're
going to go back to the, sorry, well, that's what, go ahead.
I'm saying, especially if you're sacrificing your future to do so. You know what I mean? If you're unloading top prospects just to sneak into the postseason, that you'll have a nice sigh of relief when you make it there, but in the long run, that hurts your organization.
So I go back to the Reds and the Orioles, because these are two teams at the fucking perfect intersection of the organization. Yes. This is the best time to be a fan, because you don't know who could get traded. They could move major league talent. They've talked about Jonathan India on the move. This at a time you're so excited. Players haven't been extended. You're optimistic about upcoming free agency. And most important is you want to go out and win the division. Like, this isn't, oh, great, we could sneak into the playoffs, and we haven't been to the playoffs in so long. We're talking about winning your division, which is the ultimate regular season goal for these teams. So when they show up in spring training, no one's hanging fucking World Series banner expectations. They're saying, go out and win the division. So this is a really just beautiful time to be a Reds or an Orioles fan.
For sure. I mean, there's so much optimism there. And it really, like, that stuff, as a huge softie and just as a baseball purist, I love that shit. Like, especially the Orioles right now. Maybe it's because we don't, outside of Gooch. But in terms of this network, I don't know of a ton of Reds fans that we have here. But, like, you know, when we talk to RDT about this stuff, it's like this stuff matters so much to these fans. Just that they're good is a huge step, like, for them, just to be excited in August and July about your baseball team. But it's like there is something about a baseball team peaking at the right moment that just hits differently than any other sport. And so it's unique, and I think it's made the expanded postseason has helped this quite a bit, and just the parity in baseball has helped this a lot. The fact that you can have a Cincinnati Reds team that started last year, I think 5-25, and now puts themselves in positions to maybe go win the division. I think that stuff is fucking fantastic. I love the fact, and I don't dislike or fucking hate on the Yankees the way some people do, but I love the fact that the world is kind of turned upside down. I don't think any of us expected at the beginning of this year that we would be talking about the Baltimore Orioles and the Cincinnati Reds as teams who are absolutely going to be buyers at the deadline. I think that makes the game so much better. And personally, I mean, it gives me hope that maybe next year we're talking about the Tigers in this spot. You know, maybe next year we're talking about the Cubs in this spot. I think that's awesome. I think it will allow other organizations to potentially change how they go about their business when they see how quickly a Cincinnati or a Baltimore has ascended.
My big takeaway from this conversation is that I have no idea, like, it is an infinite amount of possibilities.
Yes.
For the trade deadline here. There's a handful of teams we know for sure are going to be moving their guys. There are a handful of teams we're saying absolutely they are going to be making moves for players. And then the rest, you have these really interesting decisions for these front offices that are 4 or 5 games over 500. And are they willing to be realistic? And what is the fucking goal these days? If the goal is to go out and win the World Series, then there should be 15 to 20 sellers. If the goal is to win your division, you know, then maybe there's just 15 sellers. If the goal is to go to the wild card, then maybe there's only 6 sellers or 7 sellers.
Right.
So it's just how the rule change or how the playoff format has impacted this very important part of the season. And what I'm dying to find out is, like, does Theo Epstein, does Major League Baseball, do they value this part of the season? Or is this something they're trying to eradicate? Because from Theo's experience and from front office personnel, are they coming out of this being like, dude, the trade deadline will fucking gut your organization. Like, all the front office does for weeks is stay up till 5 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, making phone calls. Like, is that an unnecessary stress and pressure mechanism? Or does Major League Baseball value it because it's, like I said, this is by far the most engaging time to be a baseball fan on the internet, on Twitter, the way NBA and the NFL does it around the clock. Like, this is fucking it for baseball in season. And then obviously in the, hot stove stuff. But, like, in season, this is fucking it.
It may be unnecessary stress for people who work within the organizations. As a fan, I don't give a fuck. It's fun. It's baseball. It's cool. Stay up till 5 o'clock in the fucking morning doing your job. That's great. That's what baseball should be. Don't be resting on your laurels. Go out and try to win a World Series. I think that makes all of this more engaging and fun for the fans. And it goes back to the point you made at the beginning of this, which is it's a hot stove for a reason. This is the hottest time. I feel like it's the middle of the summer months. It's before football. It is the opportunity for so many teams to prove to their fans, hey, keep paying attention to the end of September because we're going for something here. I think that's fantastic. And even teams like my Tigers who are going to be sellers, there's still optimism that can come with that. You know, I mean, I'm not trying to get too excited, but there's a team that could come out of this and be like, God damn, I know we sold at the deadline, but we came out of it with 3 core pieces that we could open a championship window with here real soon. So I think that it's a potentially optimistic time for a lot of different organizations, regardless of whether or not you're buying or selling.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely exciting time. And I appreciate your preparation for the show and jumping on. It's easy to talk baseball with you. We did all 30 teams. I will say, whatever happens with the Marlins, they can win the World Series. There you go.
That was they're in a weird spot too. Yeah, they're in a weird spot as well. They're the biggest mystery. Yeah.
Hey, I knew there was a team missing as I went through our list. I was like, why did I write Twins down twice? That's all 30 teams where they stand going to the trade deadline. We're going to be back later in this week. Players, there's going to be more speculation, probably a couple trades that break now. Hopefully this gives baseball fans a good perspective on where we're coming from, or I guess with the national things, because I love what you were talking about with your dad. I want to close with this. That's most baseball fans. Most baseball fans are just trapped in the bubble of, I'm a Cubs fan, whatever. That team sucks. That team's fine. That team's everything's okay and average, and you expect to win every series. So this is more just like umbrella approach, how we see the league. Big takeaway, fucking who knows what's going to happen. Spectrum's all over the place. There's plenty of action to follow. Chris Castellani, thank you very much for doing the pre-trade deadline part 1 episode with me. I'm sure we'll be talking about this either on Friday or in next weekend's Power Ranking show. So until then, guys, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you find the show. This is Barstool Baseball, and we're fucking out here doing it. Until next time.